Right. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you could all join us in pledging allegiance to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Could we have a motion for that, please? And a second?
Second.
All those, any discussion? All those wishing to approve the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And the agenda has been approved. At this time, I'd like to turn the podium over to Superintendent Kramer for discussion regarding our exemption requests.
So as many of you know, we did submit on Monday our final draft to the Department of Education for our Smart Start plan. As part of our current Smart Start plan, it does ask or does require us to perform an exception to current state health orders that would allow us to have plexiglass dividers in between students in the classroom. So that would allow students while seated at their desks to remove their masks during those times. And in so doing so, we would then ask that exception to the state health orders, which currently state that if we are under 6 feet in any K through 12 building, that a mask is required for students or staff members or any individuals in the K through 12 building. In that situation, then I would ask that we are given permission to apply for that exception. In that situation, then we will submit the exception request to County Health. And fortunately, actually Dr. Marion was able to join us via Zoom. And I would ask her right now if she would have an opportunity to speak on her opinion of the plexiglass dividers and if she feels that would be a proper situation for us to situate ourselves in and would be taking proper safety protocols and would then in turn hopefully pass through County Health and on to State Health to be approved. So Dr. Marion, if you would be willing to comment on that, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. You know, I think it would be a viable option. Is it possible to do that? I mean, I know the kids aren't going to be able to wear the masks the whole time. We have to do something. I mean, I just watch people here at the office and it's just a nightmare, but do you think that you can physically get that done?
I'm sorry, we kind of missed half of that or a part of that there. Sorry.
Okay.
What was your question, Doctor?
I wonder if you think you can physically make the plexiglass barriers.
Right now, we do have, as part of this agenda, in preparation for the acceptance of this exception, is a purchase for 1,470 portable student desk dividers from the Sandbox Sign Company. And so that would be our plan for those dividers. And also we're encouraging that at the building levels also in regards to the cafeterias.
Okay. Okay, I think that it would be a viable plan. I know other places are talking about doing that as well.
Thank you. Also, any questions from any trustees, I'd be happy to answer in regards to that piece of the Smart Start plan. Yeah,
Trustee Wycombe.
Does Dr. Marion have evidence that these work? These
we can certainly ask.
cells or cages or whatever you want to call them?
Dr. Marion, would you wish to, I don't know if you were able to hear Trustee Wagner's question, if we have evidence, as I believe it was shared, that plexiglass barriers are effective, would that be?
I've seen people out at bomb bars and everywhere, they don't do that, they look around them and talk to each other. And I'm just wondering how efficient and how well they're going to work.
I didn't hear that question.
What Trustee Wagner asked is if we have any, or if you're aware of any evidence that would allow for those to be sufficient. And as examples were like at bomb guards where individuals are looking around them and such. Do you feel that in an educational institution that those would be appropriate means to separate students, I guess? Would that be appropriate, Trustee Wagner, in regards to your question?
You know, I don't think we really have evidence about anything. That's really the factor here. We just don't know this. We think a barrier is better than no barrier, but I'm sure there's no controlled studies that have shown it one way or the other.
Thank you.
And Trustee Miller, you've got a remark?
I had a question for Mr. Kramer. I didn't know which part, I guess, if it's about the part of use of the plexiglass. My question is how much of a day would we expect a student to wear a mask? In what situations? If we're using these in the classroom, in what would their day look like as far as asking them to wear a mask, according to the Smart Start?
So according to Smart Start and current state health guidance, right now, anytime that I cannot maintain a 6-foot distance, which is probably in my estimation about 90% of our classrooms, about 10% of our classrooms would be able to regularly social distance. And if we're able to social distance, removal of the mask and the plexiglass barrier would not be required. This would allow us in those 90% of the classrooms to provide students with a break, K through 12, from mask wearing. And so anytime instruction would be going on, and primarily we're going to have to adjust the way that we deliver instruction in most classrooms, because we've been moving and progressively over the last 10 to 20 years to not have everyone in a row sitting straight. We're really entering back into that situation where that will be the common delivery. It also allows us at the elementary to also have small groups and students still be separated there. So when they're in a small group atmosphere, the instructor can be up there, the students can also be up there, but they can have the removal of the mask. Because we do know, just like Dr. Marion mentioned, it is not probably prudent to expect any student, especially K through 5, to be able to wear a mask for 7 hours straight. I know even as an adult, in the office situation, it is challenging. And so we would want to try to provide those options for mask removal and breaks throughout the day. Another question was asked too in regards to lunchrooms. What do they look like? Are there opportunities for breaks? As long as the weather holds out, hopefully we can absolutely provide as many opportunities to get outside, social distance, removal of masks. But really what it comes down to is the criteria of any time under 6 feet that we don't have a barrier in between a student or staff member, the expectation is that a mask must be worn.
I think for our audience clarification, the picture of what these plexiglass barriers look like, I can't tell how tall it is, but it's 3-sided. So it would sit on the desk and would cover the front and both sides of the student's desk. I just thought that might be helpful.
And it's 23 inches high. Am I reading the specs right?
Yep.
Gentlemen, ladies? So that 23 inches high, 22 inches wide, and 19 inches deep, which is just slightly smaller than a typical student desktop.
So if we were to purchase the 1,470 of these that are on our agenda, we would have a reasonable expectation that that would be enough for most desks in the district.
That's correct.
Classrooms that couldn't social distance could have these, so the use of the mask would be hallways, lunchrooms, school buses.
Lunchrooms would be, we would still have, we won't use these, but we will have also dividers in order to accommodate that. In some buildings, because of the situation of scheduling, there will be a need to have lunches served in classrooms with this type of situation or rotation. And some will be able to social distance depending upon the numbers and depending upon the schedule. Biggest piece that we're trying to follow is anytime a mask is not worn, there has to be 6 feet of distance or a plexiglass divider.
So buses and hallways mostly.
Yep, and anytime any student would have to get up from their desk, move around the room and those type of things. But yes, buses and hallways would be that exact time. Yep. The other concern too that I've had parents ask about are those students that struggle with hearing and depend on lip movement. Even at the elementary level, one of the pieces that we are looking and moving forward on are the see-through masks for our lower elementary because of really letter development and demonstration. So even when they have the mask, we'd be able to utilize that. The other piece too is what the plexiglass dividers also allow us to do is if a teacher is at the front of the room and they have that divider in front of them, they can also in turn remove their mask. So if we do have the older students that are in freshman, sophomore, middle school, can also then have that ability to see the formation of what letters or words they might be trying to display. Because I know I've had that conversation with a couple of parents that was a significant concern for them.
Superintendent Kramer, are these collapsible? So do you anticipate high school and middle school students carrying their shield with them to their different classes?
That is correct. And that way we wouldn't have to disinfect between each class. So we would be able to have one assigned to each student. And then of course it'd be disinfected after school and the day before the day. But it would allow us to not have to clear a room,
Right.
disinfect the room, then allow students in. We're able to transport. If in the case of where we would have not our full order delivered, what we have decided is that we would fulfill that at the lowest levels first and then work up from there. But we have done a lot of research on which companies and the availability of when they can get them to us.
Would there be disinfection of the desk? They would take their shield with them.
The challenge will, yes, we still have to, yes.
Between classes, yeah.
Mr. Kramer, we've had parents that have said that their children are medically fragile enough. The doctors have said if masks aren't worn, a child can't come to school. Will these plexiglass eliminate that possibility that the doctors would say, oh, well, if you have something like that?
There is that possibility, surely. It would probably depend on their medical provider. As I've talked to a number of doctors and things, like as Dr. Miriam had referenced, this helps and allows for us to accommodate. In some situations, there may be certain doctors, because of the level of need or the level of help, they still may say, no, that's not enough. But my hope would be that this would be sufficient and allowing for as many students as we can possibly have in our school system as possible. Because you're absolutely right. There will be children, if we have that situation, that will not be able to attend school in those non-mask wearing situations.
Any further questions, concerns? Trustee McClung.
Sure, I have a concern about students being able to hear with those dividers. Is that going to be a challenge? Do you know?
Fortunately, as a district, we've been able to Brian, when would you say we started the process of having the speakers in our classrooms? Yeah, over an 8-year period, we've actually had speakers added and microphones even before this situation. And so our rooms are equipped with the portable mic system, and so should be able to accommodate any of the challenges with hearing and having that barrier.
And the speakers are in the ceiling generally, so they don't have to, the sound doesn't have to bounce around between plexiglass shields.
What is the name of that system? Do you remember, recall?
Red Cat.
Yeah, Red Cat is the name of the system that we utilize in our classrooms. That's an infrared, correct? Is what
Yes.
is infrared frequency that the mic is more or less progressed, and it's a wireless mic that the teacher is able to wear.
Where will students get masks?
The school district will provide masks. We are planning right now to provide free sets for each individual student, and also too at the lower elementary, the see-through masks.
So how, once we've given those masks, will they be replaced? Are they washable?
Yes, launder.
Is it possible for students to bring their own masks?
Yes.
So this is Marianne Smith again, and I have a question about the teachers. I guess I'm more concerned about the health of the teachers and the staff. And what are you doing anything special for that, for protection?
In regards to students, or I guess we could clarify.
Just, I don't know, are you gonna put them in a little plastic cage, or I just,
They would be, the expectation then would be that they still wear their mask the same way unless they're instructing from the front of the room when all students are behind. If there's not social distancing taking place or the 6 feet, that would be a situation in which masks would be required.
okay,
Teachers also have planned and looked at this during this process of the Smart Start development on our curriculum committees. What one of the pieces was really discussing what small group instruction could look like at the lower levels. Because one of the major concerns for teachers was that interaction in small groups at their kidney tables and such, how to still maintain that and ability in a safe way. And so one of the biggest pieces that we kind of talked about was the plexiglass dividers, and then their ability also to, anytime when we have individuals that are less than 6 feet away without the divider, mask would be required.
okay.
And Superintendent Kramer, would it be appropriate for aides or teachers to ask students to put on their masks in order to facilitate some one-on-one work?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Anytime, we've kind of just had the overarching rule under that Smart Start. Anytime there's not a divider, it would require both parties to have a mask, not just one individual in the partner situation.
So that would provide some protection to our medically vulnerable adults.
That is correct, yes.
So this is Marianne Smith again. I'm going to have to sign off here pretty quick, but I'm kind of concerned about, I've already been asked about writing notes to say I don't need to wear a mask. And I think it's pretty well delineated in your literature there, what would constitute an acceptable exception to wearing a mask. And I guess I kind of wondered what you're planning to, how you're going to handle that. And I mean, I don't want 25 kids in the office here asking for notes. They don't have to wear a mask, because I think if they're special ed or they're so incapable of taking care of themselves, they couldn't get the mask off themselves, or those sort of things, but not just because I have a runny nose. I mean, I think we really need to be on the same page with that as well. So what do you think about that?
In regards to those exceptions that were identified in the state health orders, one being from a medical professional documentation, either possessed by the parents from previous visits or a current one or up-to-date one would be required for the medical documentation piece. In regards for IEPs or 504 students, this could be elaborated on a team meeting, much like our IEP team, determining and having that conversation along with the parent, along with the educators involved, that absolutely this is not something that will be educationally viable for this child. And so therefore that exception would be granted. And the other, I believe the last, there's three situations. And in the last portion of it is if it's not educationally, I believe, viable is how it might be interfere with the ability to effectively participate in educational activities. What we've determined there is that, again, would be a process of a team decision, including the parent, teacher, and administrator, to determine that there are situations in which we do have, there's an increased risk of disease transmission or increased hand-to-face contact. And so in those situations, once that team or group would determine, yes, that in fact would be an increased risk of disease transmission, they would be granted then that exception based on the state health orders.
Does that help, Doctor?
Yes, it does. I guess I want us all to want to protect each other. This whole situation is just getting out of hand, and I just want us all to be on the same page.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes, and I hate to go, but I really need to sign off. I've got some other obligations I've just got to take care of. So maybe if there's questions or I can help in any way, I'd surely be glad to.
Dr. Marion, there may be one question that might come up, and maybe you could answer this before you sign off. There may be discussion later after this agenda item or during this agenda item in regards to optional mask wearing. I just kind of wanted to know your opinion on that. So before you'd have a chance to sign off, you'd have a chance to give us your opinion if we would be looking at an exception like that.
So what would that look like? What do you mean?
That individual students would have the option, or individual families would have the option that if they so choose to not wear face coverings, that they would not have to.
Well, the problem with that is I don't wear a mask to protect myself. I wear a mask to protect you. And if you don't wear a mask, then I'm at risk. So I guess I don't know that that's going to work.
Thank you. That was just something that I know that in other meetings that I've had have been through discussions, and I know that may come up later in this meeting. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that, because if we were to look at an exemption, then of course the first step is to go to your office in regards to sending it towards the state. So I appreciate your opinion.
Okay. And I think this is such a dynamic process that the answers to these questions will probably be different tomorrow. I mean, we just have to go forward with what we think is the best thing to do for ourselves and for our community. And I don't know, when the first person tests positive in your school, are we going to close down? It'll be a whole different ballgame. So I know we just have to go forward and do what we think is the best for ourselves and our community. So that's the answer for today, and tomorrow will probably be different.
Thank you, Dr. Marion.
All right, so I'm going to sign off, and good luck with everything, and let me know if I can help in any way.
Thank you.
So do we need a motion to approve this exemption?
Yes, a motion to approve me applying for the exception to the state health. Yes, that would be what I would like.
Okay, could we have a motion, please?
So
And a second? Thank you. Any discussion about submitting this exemption?
I just have a couple of questions that I should probably ask before.
No, that's fine, please.
Has the school district tested air exchanges in any of the rooms? Do we know what that air exchange rate is in a room?
I don't know if our maintenance has had any tests done. No, we have not tested any of the air exchange rates.
Just the more rapid those exchange rates are, evidence would suggest that it's less likely transmission. So the more effective this type of situation might be. The information provided in the packet today shows a ship date later than school start. Does that mean a delayed start to school?
We had not anticipated a later start to school. I believe, if you can maybe answer what they can get us and what we were planning on.
We've ordered 180 dividers, which we hope may be here by the start of school for the vulnerable population. That order was within the purchasing guidelines of Mr. Kramer. And this is the best that we can do. The demand and the cost of this type of product is changing every day.
Thank you.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
I just had a question about, going back to the masks. If a student chooses not to wear the mask at all during the day, how is that going to be handled? Are those students going to be sent home? What's going to happen there? Because I do know you're going to have the students.
Yep, it would be handled, what we've talked about in our discussions is a dress code violation. And so just as any dress code situation, we would first ask for alternatives to either, like if we had something with an inappropriate shirt or anything like that, have the conversation around needing to wear the mask. And if there's continued refusal, then taking those next steps in regards to discipline referrals. And then eventually, if there's still continuous referrals, then it would be unfortunately a time in which the student would not be able to attend for a refusal of wearing a mask.
So you're saying if a student feels uncomfortable wearing a mask and will not get an exemption, you may as well stay home?
If a student doesn't qualify for one of the exemptions and has gone through the process of refusal after refusal after refusal, then we'd look at alternative education opportunities for them, whether they be the remote education opportunities that we're providing synchronously, or the opportunity to have the Edmentum program also, or in a program in which we could provide as much social distancing as possible in some situations. We'd want to work with that individual student, see what ways we can accommodate before we not have them within our parameters and things.
I know there's quite a number of students like that.
Absolutely. There's a good question.
I mean, just a heads up, so these parents know that they need to be looking to homeschool.
I wouldn't say necessarily homeschool. That is an option, absolutely. But we'd like to accommodate as best we can, either through the synchronous option or the Edmentum program too. But yes, if we do not have an exception or an exception to the state health orders, or in certain situations, because we do know the state health orders are set to expire right before the start of school, our expectation is that we follow state health orders. If those in turn would change, we would adapt and change to those needs also. We're not trying to exceed any expectations that the state has set forth. We just want to follow the current state health orders.
Any further discussion regarding Superintendent Kramer applying for this exemption?
I think that this exemption is our best effort to help our kids get an education in schools without having to wear a mask all day while still following state health orders. I think it's our best option, the best thing that we can do at the moment. I don't know. I mean, looking at that, I feel like it's as good as wearing a mask. I mean, it makes sense it would be as good as wearing a mask because it's going to keep any bodily fluids, sneezes, anything from transferring. And it, just like Dr. Marion said, it's all kind of a guess. Might change tomorrow, might change next week. I guess my biggest concern about it is that it says that it will ship through the week of 8/31. And how do we handle those first few weeks?
And what we're trying to do also is, if we can, and we've researched even just finding as much product that we can build in turn also. And so we've tried looking as many options as we possibly can, and this being our best one-stop shop. So there may be situations in which we have other additional options to have them as school begins, because we're continually trying to get access to that.
What about, have we considered face guards instead of masks? The plastic that would sit out from your face, has that been?
It's been discussed, but that has not been one in which, and I kind of maybe allude to either, I know Heather Saul was able to join us on this, and I know Zach has some familiarity, Trustee Miller, with face shields in regards to that. We've had some limited discussion, but I'm certainly no expert on face shields, but I know there is still some concern in regards to face shields being proper ability to provide as much protection. Would that be correct, Trustee Miller?
Yeah, I mean, according to the CDC's information that they've published as of today, they don't recommend the use of a face shield for normal activities as a substitute to a mask.
I would like those trustees who wish to approve the motion for submitting an exemption to our Smart Start plan to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Any abstentions? That motion carried 8-1 in favor of moving forward on that exemption. Now, our next item is to consider the approval of the purchase of these plexiglass shields.
I think there would be still, if there is any discussion on any further exemptions, I do want to allow that.
Okay.
Discussion if there is any.
I'm sorry.
Nope, you're fine from any trustees or any conversations further along in the exceptions.
I have a question about the, that we brought up about teachers. If teachers are vulnerable, will they be given the option to work from home or from a private room and help with those students that are choosing virtual education or some other option?
Our process for that is if a teacher has some concerns, medical concerns, that first they provide central office with documentation from their medical provider indicating that there's a health concern for them or somebody that they're having to care for, and would be more in tune with teaching in a remote fashion. And so once we have that list established, and then also once we've established the list for the number of students that we will have that will need the delivery of instruction remotely, we will then take those individual certified teachers and then have them provide that instruction. After the medical list, then it goes down. Eventually, the last criteria is seniority. In between that is if they are certified, of course, because in the state of Wyoming, in accordance with any virtual education plan, they have to be certified in that area to deliver instruction. Then the next area would be if they're practicing in that area. And then, of course, if there's two that are doing those same criteria, have all the same things, it would come down eventually to seniority. And then those most senior in the district will be the one chosen to provide that instruction remotely.
Thank you.
And we've had a number, we've had approximately 4 inquiries on that currently.
Are the teachers aware that they need to obtain that documentation?
Last, I believe it was what was our district-wide Monday on that? On Monday, then we did talk about the Smart Start plan, and in our Smart Start plan discussed the delivery of remote education, and that was discussed on exactly what they would need to do. And I've had a number also reach out to me.
Okay.
Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
So as it relates to the Smart Start plan, I've skimmed through it. Well, I've read through it a couple of times and then just skimming through it prior to this meeting today. Just want to verify, if masks are required in classrooms, you get up, move around. Is there hand sanitizer available to be placed in every classroom?
Yes, that's actually part of the plan also, is either the hand sanitation, or using hand sanitizer, or washing of hands. If the availability is around for a sink in certain situations, certain classrooms are equipped with that also. And then also, I think it does cite too, within that Smart Start plan, instruction in regards to the use of masks and proper hand washing techniques performed by school nurses at each of our buildings also.
So regarding these plexiglass, during each class, after, at the end of class, will the student be cleaning and sanitizing this?
At the end of the school day, because that would be something that we would look at first for custodial staff to perform those cleaning duties.
So we're talking about them doing this once a day?
Yes, that's correct. As long as they're with that student and that same student, it would be the one time per day.
Mr. Kramer, are you aware of how our Smart Start plan compares to our neighboring counties?
I have not seen neighboring county Smart Start plans. I've seen some FAQs and some discussions. I think some of those may, in regards to initial conversations, changed because of the new updated state health orders. And recently, we had some significant discussions with the governor. And one of the questions that I specifically asked was that if a district Smart Start plan does not follow the state health orders, is it required that a school district apply for an exception or variance? And it was stated within that meeting with all the superintendents in the state that yes, in fact, if there is any deviation, a school district must apply for an exception or a variance before they could have any differences within what is the expectation. I did suggest also, and I don't know, I have not heard of any response. I did this about a week and a half ago and suggested this to the Department of Education that if any Smart Start plans were submitted, that it would be a good idea to have those exceptions or variances attached. So the Department of Education could then also support districts in realizing that this is the process. This is the way that we actually go about looking at state health orders and looking at our individual counties and the differences from county to county and apply for those variances to be granted those exceptions and such.
Anything further before we proceed?
Yes, I have a letter from the Goshen County Republican Party that I'd like to read. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I have not seen the letter, no.
Okay, it's the Goshen County Republican Party resolution on freedom to make healthcare decisions for July 20th, 2020. Whereas the Wyoming Constitution declares the ability to make healthcare decisions for oneself and one's children a right, as stated in Article 1, Section 38. Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Section 38, right of health care access. Each competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own health care decisions. Parent, guardian, or legal representative of any other natural person shall have the right to make health care decisions for that person. Any person may pay a healthcare provider, may accept direct payment for healthcare without imposition of penalties or fines for doing so. The legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted under this section to protect health and general welfare of the people or to accomplish the other purposes set forth in the Wyoming Constitution. The state of Wyoming shall act to preserve these rights from undue governmental infringement. And whereas the Wyoming State Legislature passed legislation in 2017 protecting rights of parents as fundamental rights, as stated in Wyoming Statute 14.2.206. Wyoming State Statute 14.2.206, protection of parent rights. The liberty of a parent to care, custody, and control of their child is a fundamental right that resides first in the parent. The state or any agency or political subdivision of the state shall not infringe on the parental right as provided under this section without demonstrating that the interest of the government as applied to the parent or child is compelling state interest addressed by the least restrictive means. Therefore, be it resolved that the Goshen County Republican Party supports Wyoming law protecting the rights of the individual to control their own healthcare decisions and those of their children. Be it further resolved that the Goshen County Republican Party supports rights of the parent to decide if their children will comply with the requirements of the Wyoming Department of Health or local school board, which have to do with COVID-19 measures in taxpayer-funded schools. Be it further resolved that the Goshen County Republican Party supports the right of every parent to send their child to school if they so choose. And that was forwarded to me by Sherry Steinmetz.
Thank you, Jeff.
Are we ready to move on to item E? This item is to consider the approval of the purchase.
I just want to make sure everybody, this would be the opportunity for any trustees if there is in turn, a request to have further exceptions to our state health orders, that trustees would bring this up at this time to have that conversation and move that forward in a motion. I made the recommendation for that initial one, but I want to make sure that this item is calling for that also. If there's any additions to any exceptions, this would be the time to have that conversation before we move on to the next agenda item.
Trustee McClellan.
I guess without having research, I would so move that the parent will have opportunity to sign a release form for their child to not.
Can I clarify? Is it all right to jump in and clarify that? So the directive would be to advise me to fill out an exception to current state health orders that would allow parents to fill out a request to not wear a mask while under 6 feet of distance. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Thank you.
As stated by section, or Article 1, Section 38 of the state statute.
Thank you.
If I could add that to your motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So would this be a request for individual students to be able to apply for an exemption? Is that what we're saying?
That's what I would be interpreting it as, that there would not be necessarily a medical requirement or documentation requirement. It would strictly be completely up to the parent, in essence, making masks optional within the district. Is that correct?
Yes.
Trustee McClellan, thank you.
That's the way I'd like to have it.
Madam Chairman, I'd ask for a roll call
When we are there, I will grant
vote.
you
Yeah,
your
motion in
request.
seconds.
Can we discuss?
Did we ask
We're
for a
in the
second?
middle of discussion right now. I just have concerns, as we discussed about our medically fragile students and medically vulnerable adults. Typically, the courts have interpreted constitutional rights as absolute until they create a danger for someone else. And it seems as though this has the potential to create a danger for other people. Requiring folks to come to work or to attend school with students who may be carrying a virus which is potentially lethal to someone does not fall within your constitutional rights.
But within that section and C, it says that under reasonable and necessity, restrictions of the rights are granted to protect the health and general welfare of the people. I mean, section C says, yes, you have this right, but if the public health is in jeopardy, those rights can be Okay.
Madam Chair,
Sir,
I just think, I appreciate the motion. I think there's a misconception that the mask protects you. That is not true. Wearing a mask today doesn't protect me from Ryan. It protects Ryan from me. We've seen with the number of last cases that are out there that a lot of them have been asymptomatic. So when they come in contact with that individual that's medically compromised, I believe that causes an infringement on their health. It's not your child's health that you're protecting by signing that waiver. You're potentially endangering another's. So that would, and that's exactly, again, if you are not going to any news source or page of that, but following only the CDC guidelines, that's exactly what they would say.
so I have a concern and a question. My concern, I don't necessarily believe that the government should tell us to wear or not wear a mask. My biggest concern for the district is if we choose not to follow state health orders, where does that leave us with litigation and responsibility to folks that may get sick? That's my biggest concern. And then my question would be back to the actual form as the motion is stated. Would we say, we're saying that we as a district would accept that form, or we would take that form and offer it to the state and ask for an exemption on that behalf, on that person's behalf? Which are we saying? We're saying our district will accept it, or we'll ask the state to accept it?
The only thing that the Board of Trustees is able to do at this time is to apply for an exception or variance to current state health orders. The steps that still need to be followed are that even with this approval or agreement that we fill this out, following this, it still has to be submitted to first our Goshen County health officials, who have to then take a look, is this reasonable? Is this an option that we feel we can support? And then it's sent on to the state health official to determine if that is the case. I think that does at least address the litigation component, because in fact, we are not the governing body on saying we're not going to follow state health orders, because that's why I think our state health orders are written correctly and given counties an avenue to proceed with individual and local situations, as opposed to across the state where we know there's extreme differences in the number of virus cases. Unfortunately, I think in our state, we've not used that correctly over this summer, especially for schools. And that's why I've been very diligent in following that process. And that's why I feel that it's an important process to follow regarding applying for those exceptions and variances. The other piece to that is certainly concern, as Dr. Marion mentioned, for the number of students that we have that could significantly impact. And we do have in current state health orders opportunities for those that we know that are impacted negatively, possibly with the requirement of masks, to have an opportunity to review that, where we can grant those even without having board or applying for state health exemptions, that we can locally grant individuals if they have medical documentation or IEP team determination or local school district determination in conjunction with the parent, that there's still opportunities for individual students to not be forced to wear a mask.
In response to that information, I am not comfortable making health decisions whether people should or should not wear masks, but I am in support of giving families and parents every opportunity to apply for exemptions.
And I feel, just to kind of clarify, I do feel that current state health orders, even without an exception or variance, does provide that and provides that avenue to have parents have that discussion with the school system through that process and not through a separate exemption. I think a separate exemption, as we illustrated, lowers that requirement for families, and in turn doesn't necessarily look at information that would be returning. It could be as simple as I believe that I don't want to wear one, and that could be submitted. And I think unfortunately that would put our vulnerable staff and students at more risk. And I've made this comparison a lot, and many of you have probably heard me make this comparison since March, what this has been like for all of us and all of us parents. It's been like a snow day at 4 a.m. You know, when it starts snowing, we have to make the decision as to whether we're going to have a 2-hour late start or a full day off, or if we're going to have school. And what I've been, you know, under that principle, safety is the paramount issue in that situation. And I think we have to look at it in this situation too. If current state health orders are provided for our safety, and we still also have options for families that we know this could be extremely meaningful as to whether they're able to send their child or not based on optional or required face mandate. But we still have the option within state health orders to provide those students with those certain situations to not be asked to wear face masks. I think we are at a situation that provides as much as we possibly can for both groups, as opposed to going significantly in one direction to allow possibly one group not being able to attend school.
One of the questions that I have is, how do we enforce our own school policies and county health policies about head lice? When students have head lice, they are required to demonstrate that they're no longer infested before they come back to school, which a parent could just simply say, I don't believe in any of the treatments. I don't think that the treatments should be required of my child. I'll do what I can, but my child will come back to school regardless. And that would seem to violate the constitutional provisions of parental control, but we still have that general health requirement regulation. In order to protect the rest of the students in the classroom, we don't allow students with lice to be in contact with them. And that's infringing on a parent's right, I guess, to determine healthcare. So that's where I have an issue that I have come up with in my own thinking about this situation.
I feel that we have a responsibility to do for our students and our staff and our volunteers the most that we can do for their safety. And following the state guidelines is what we have to do to keep everyone safe. I think these barriers are a good compromise for everybody.
I have a question. So let's say we go forward and we do this exception request and it gets denied. Where are we at? Back to 1B still? We haven't lost any ground?
No. The concern I would have with that is if it were granted, how we go about implementing that, and then in turn, having the response that we may have in regards to making an educational decision. Because there will be, it will be a time period to have that exception granted or denied. I have had anywhere from 24 hours to up to on some, and during prime times for other situations, you know, regarding graduation, up to a week and a half to 2 weeks.
And with the start of school, it's probably going to be that 2-week option.
Right, but the crux of my question is what does it hurt us to try at least? I mean, I get it, you know, and so many of these things that we talk about, not just this, I've tried to keep my personal preference out of it. Because I have a teacher, my wife is a teacher in the district, I have 2 kids in the district. And when it comes to health and safety, I really think I probably have as much right as anybody at this table to decide, but I've tried to keep my personal preference out of it. That being said, I understand the argument. And I think maybe part of what we need to do is at least try, because that's what we need to do.
if we can still continue to provide good education and at least give people the choice. Because whether or not, my kids will probably wear a mask, whatever we decide, right? But that's still my choice. It's still our choice. But I understand that we developed this with safety in mind, and I'm all for safety, believe me. Because 2 out of the 4 members of my family are asthmatic, and studies have shown that this affects asthmatics more than the regular person. So I don't know, it's a risk for me. But let's consider at least trying so that we give people that choice.
I don't know how staff would be able to keep track of who's got the exemption and who doesn't have the exemption. I think that would be a nightmare for people to go, oh yeah, you don't have to wear one, like you do, I'm sorry. I just think we do it uniformly and safely.
In some of my conversations, one concern I would have is that I do know and have seen the medical documentation that we will be eliminating students from school because their doctors have said, if masks are optional, we can't count on you being able to attend school. And that unfortunately takes choice out of it. We're not providing those families with choice. We're really telling them, this is your only choice. Now, with the masks, and we do have caveats within current state health orders that do allow for current opportunities for those that are medically vulnerable to not have to wear masks, or if it's educationally disruptive, to not wear masks. I think if we open that door in regards to having just personal preference, or really in essence, mask optional, we do eliminate a large, I shouldn't say a large, potentially a percentage of students from our district from attending in person because of that exception being granted.
Do we stand at any risk? I asked Trustee Chairman Patrick this earlier in setting this meeting up, but have we consulted with our attorney that if we were to proceed with such a request and it's granted, do we then stand at risk because we are essentially not in compliance with public health orders should one of those medically vulnerable children come ill or not be able to?
I have not inquired specifically about that question. I can probably speak to any of the exceptions or variances that we have been in regards to the same as graduation when those have been applied for. We've probably also done similar actions by not following those specific health orders, but following that exception and variance protocol has allowed us to be in following with current state health orders.
I haven't said much tonight regarding this, but I want to at least just say that first and foremost, I want to thank you as well as everybody else that has put in such hard work in developing the plan. I would have to say that I have had the chance to be able to actually see a lot of you at work on this, and I have to say, I respect the time and effort and all the hours that you guys put into this and the thought. I've always been, of the mindset that, you prepare for the worst and you hope for the best. And who knows? I mean, tomorrow, next week, next month, COVID, gone, might disappear. Won't be here anymore. But in the case that it isn't, we have a responsibility to all of this. And I get that we do have statutes that say, yeah, you give people, we don't make that decision for them. I don't believe that politicizing the lives of our children, I'm not in that position. I want to look at the health and safety of them, teachers, parents, everybody in this community. Just within this week, we had a jump from town meeting. Is that it? I believe it was? In each period of time. And who knows what's to come? We're starting the beginning of school. We're having to face this COVID, salmonella, possibly flu season coming. I think we need to protect ourselves. Again, as Mr. Miller said, you know, I'm wearing this because I don't know. I may be asymptomatic. I may be sitting here beside Mr. Wagner. Respect out of him, I'm wearing this mask, not because of the fact that I think he's going to give it to me, but I've worked with him and I know him. And, you know, we may not always see eye to eye, but out of respect, I want to make sure that if I am asymptomatic, then I'm not going to pass it on to you. So my view is that I'm not doing this for any other reason except for the health and safety of all those involved. And I believe that, again, I think that we're trying to do the best we possibly can with your guidance as well as everybody else's guidance. And I say that, you know, we just need to continue on looking at that direction.
Madam Chairman, I think the question was asked about the liability, whether we as a board would be liable. Could we ask Senator Steinmetz to give us what the state statutes say on that?
At this time, I would just agree that the state grants school districts a limited shield from liability. I would accede, however, that if we were to proceed against the recommendations of the State Board of Health, that we would absolutely be liable. And I'd be happy for anyone who does not want their child to wear a mask to pool their money and provide, you know, indemnify the district against any of those lawsuits. I think that would be a show of good faith.
That's a pretty ridiculous statement.
I'm sorry.
I would have to agree with you, Kevin. I'm sorry for me, it's not political. It's not whether I get reelected next time I'm up. It's not about litigation. It's about maintaining as best as we can the health and safety of our staff, our students, and our volunteers. And I would like to also say again, thank you. I know the work that you guys have put in this summer to do this. You guys look exhausted. And you must just be crawling into work every day, going, oh my gosh. And so I thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts that you guys have been here to try to get this pulled together to be able to get our kids back to school.
The number of staff that have been able to come in is phenomenal, and to work on that. Yes, I would agree that the work has been amazing by the number of people who put forward effort. And it is not just any individual, that's for certain, but a whole team effort from many, many individuals.
Madam Chairman,
Sir.
I would like to make a statement that I'm not politicizing the health of our kids. I'm very concerned about it. I have a great granddaughter and I have 2 grandsons who are in the school system. And I have a lot of teachers that I have great respect for and care about a lot. And I wouldn't want any of them to get it either. And I'm not trying to politicize this. I care about each one of you guys on the board. I pray for you every day. I pray for this school board. I pray for the kids. I pray for our superintendent. And I'm not politicizing this. And we have to realize one thing. God is in control, whether we like it or not. We have to have a degree of faith that he holds us in his hand and that we're not just going to get this for no uncertain reason. And so I've said what I'd like to say. Thank you.
No, Rod, I appreciate, or excuse me, Trustee Wagner. I appreciate that, and I would say the same. You know, I pray for the school district, for all of us at this table, for the members of our community, our students and staff. You know, I'm not trying to politicize it either. I certainly didn't mean any disrespect by my comments earlier by, at least entertaining the motion. And I also want to thank, we've received several emails from concerned parents. And I truly believe, there was three a couple weeks ago, I got 3 more today, truly advocating for their kids. That alongside, the same amount of emails for people who were in support of masks. So it's not an easy decision sitting up here trying to decide what's best for our kids. And I will say that for as many emails as I got that were advocating for their kid one way or another, I got just as many emails from people who, for lack of a better term, were too coward to come talk to me in my face. And they were politicizing. And that's the unfortunate part, is that whether we're politicizing it or not, it's happening. And it's unfortunate. And it makes it even harder, especially for me. It's put strains on professional relationships for me, for personal relationships for me. I think my wife and kids would rather I just move out at this point because it's driving me crazy. You want to talk about litigation? It shouldn't matter about litigation because if we have to defend ourselves, that's money out the door. I mean, you sat there at last meeting and talked about how citizens of this county don't get to vote on the rec board mill levy. Voters don't get a choice if we have to pay out litigation. So seriously consider that. It doesn't matter what we decide, because we're going to tick off half the people anyway. So, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm getting on my soapbox, and I apologize for my outburst.
Madam Chair.
Sir.
So this is a really hard thing, obviously. I feel one way about this situation, but I've also been contacted about other people. So what we've heard tonight is let's apply for an exemption to masks. I think that's fine. However, what about the families who send their kids to school? They can't take it when their kid gets sick. It has to be at home for a week, 2 weeks, whether it's home to recover or in the hospital. I've got probably 12 pages of notes from when we met about our 4-day school week. A lot of the same concerns right with my kids. So I'm wondering at what point we get 1 case in the schools, 2 cases, 10 cases, 20, the school gets shut down and everybody gets to go home again. Because believe me, last spring, not much education happened in this community, and that's a crying shame. My son's going to be a junior this year. I wonder if I'm going to have him enrolled in Goshen County schools, because if we get closed down, I'm watching 32 videos and making comments if you liked it or not. It's not education. I'm sorry, it's just not. So this is my thought. This is my personal thought. I really like the fact I don't love plexiglass, but if kids can at least have an option to have their mask off during the day, aren't we giving ourselves maybe a better shot at staying in school even longer? To where whatever happens with the virus happens, whether it's a vaccine, when somebody wants it, it goes away, we find out kids don't get it, whatever it may be, if we can give ourselves the best chance possible to stay in school. I get it, everybody wants to have a choice, I know that, but I also know with little kids, especially the ones that have to wear a mask, because mommy or just daddy says so, then how do you explain that to them when their friend that's 6 feet away behind plexiglass doesn't have to wear it? That becomes really difficult. And that becomes hell to listen to them, especially when they have to tell their kid why everybody else gets to be a different way. That's a hard thing, especially at school. So I've tried to think of an analogy to this. I think I finally came to it. It's like all these kids are in this airplane right now, and they're all going to jump out. Which parachute opens? Which ones don't? We don't know. Nobody knows. But the ones that open, the ones that aren't going to be affected by the virus, we get to watch our friends land hard, right? I feel like as the school board, and maybe the staff or whoever, we're the ones pushing the kids out the door. Here you go, good luck. Here you go, good luck. So this is my personal struggle inside is, yes, I get it. We want personal choice, but we've got to protect the kids and the families that want to have the mask too. Where's the compromise? Hopefully it would be, as much as I don't like spending $40,000 on plexiglass, somebody's getting rich on plexiglass. Maybe that's the best option for now. I mean, is this the rock solid, this is the way it is the rest of the school year? I'd hope not. This has got to be a fluid thing because what's happening in this country is fluid. It changes every day. My soapbox is over. Good luck to everybody. Hope your kids are all safe.
Hearing no further discussion, I would like you to consider your vote on forwarding a request for an exemption to the State Department of Ed, Department of Health regarding making face masks optional. And there has been a request for a roll call vote. I'll begin by voting against this motion. Trustee Miller.
A difficult decision, but I will vote for the motion.
Can you read it again? Because my understanding was that we were applying for exemptions that would give. I want to make sure I understand what it is we're exactly voting for.
And I think actually, Trustee Patrick kind of simplified it in really in essence, and Trustee McClellan, please correct me if I'm incorrect. We'll actually have a longer, if we have that in notes, possibly we can reread that. But in essence, what this exemption would allow would be to have masks as options.
That's not what I just voted for.
Oh,
That's not my understanding.
Was that correct?
Yeah, with,
That it would, in essence, make, if I'm an individual, your motion was to apply for an exemption that would allow for individuals to have the option to wear masks whether they want to or not. Am I saying that correctly?
with parent approval.
With parent approval, thank you.
So we would require some sort of parent approval, a letter, no.
Yep, thank you for the clarification.
Can I read what I have? Can we go back to what we really have? Because I thought we were talking about giving people the right to give us a form that we would apply. We would give it to the state and let them answer. I didn't think we were answering. We are.
Chairman Patrick, I do, I've also asked, and I didn't realize, Heather Saul from County Health would like to speak and provide their input there on that information, if that's acceptable. If we're not okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Heather, if you'd like to speak at this time, I forgot to garner that. I had Dr. Marion, but
No, it's all good. And I hope you guys can hear me okay. I appreciate you guys having us on here to hopefully answer some questions and get some clarification. So an exemption, we would do that specifically for each individual school. Now for our county, we would do a county health variance, which would bring all the schools into that. With that being said, if we do an exemption for a school specifically or a variance county health or county-wise, we would do that saying it would be, if it goes outside the state health orders and the kid has a medical issue or whatever, I can't even put it into words, that's where we would do the exemption. It shouldn't just be optional for a parent to say, yeah, I'm gonna have my kid wear it or not wear it. State health orders says it is required for the students to wear a mask if they cannot adhere to that 6 feet. I understand there are medical issues, and that's why we're doing the plexiglass as a barrier. So yeah, I think that's how we approach it and how we explain that to the parents. And if we want to do an exemption for the school, specific school, whether it's Lingle School, Torrington, or Southeast, or if we want to do a variance overall for each school. And we will look at it along with Dr. Marion. And if it's okay at our level, it will go up to Dr. Harris for the final approval. And I will tell you, she will look at our current positive cases. They're going to look at the matrix and those things, and she will go from there. So.
thanks for that clarification.
I thought that was you reading the motion.
I'm gonna have her do it.
Yes. Because I've been reserved the right to change my vote depending what it says, because what my understanding is and what we're saying is not the same thing.
So definitely the parent would
have the opportunity to sign a release form for the child not to wear a mask. And then Ryan clarified that we would ask to file an exemption, ask parents to sign a waiver to release their students from, I think it's basically wearing masks. And then Rod seconded.
So with what Ms. Saul just said, an exception, it would be each school building or each town related?
So it would go off of each individual school specifically. So for example, if Southeast ends up, God forbid, we end up with 2 positive cases, how that will affect the number in that school compared to Torrington School compared to Lingle School. Just like Lingle's football field compared to Torrington's football field, each one has different numbers, and so that's what we would have to base it off of.
Okay, and so what you said was if we wanted something that was district wide, it would have to be applying for a variance.
Correct. Yep, that would be a variance.
And that's the motion
I
to
believe
apply
that
for
was
the
the intent
variance.
of the motion. That's not what he said, but I believe that's the intent.
That's the intent.
The intent is to apply for the variance for the entire district, correct? Not for an individual request.
Is that correct, Justin? I assume so also, but I wanted to make sure.
Say that again, clarification, apply for a variance.
Yes. To allow parental choice about mask wearing. Is that accurate?
Or would you add anything regarding, you'd reference the form? Would you like that included in the motion or in the application for variance?
Yes, probably.
A waiver.
Waiver, yes.
So the state health order is that masks are to be worn. It's 6-foot distancing can't be kept. They're asking for us to go outside of that order by allowing parents to be given the opportunity to write a note to their school, wherever they're at, for their child not to wear a mask.
Is that accurate?
So if we're back to discussion, I would be supportive of if it were like individual cases. I would hope that people wouldn't come en masse and ask us to make the exception, because then the whole go back to school plan doesn't work. If somebody had, I don't know, if they were claustrophobic, or I mean, there could be a few reasons, and I would be supportive of giving parents the right to ask us to ask for an exemption on an individual child's behalf, but not for the entire Smart Start that we.
That actually, in current state health orders, that already exists.
Is claustrophobia part of that? I guess that is medical.
If there's medical documentation, or it inhibits their educational ability to gain out education, and a teacher and principal and parent all are in agreement of that, there's already the ability in current state health orders to allow for that individual student to not wear a mask.
So just, in essence, any individual that could go to county health, would it be, or state health, to apply for individual exceptions?
Currently, right now, without for this variance, that is correct, that I would have 3 different options, or really 2 3 if I have an IEP. I could either go to have my medical doctor provide me with documentation that says, because of asthma or this situation, I am unable to wear a mask. The other option would be and I know of some families that have already gone down to Children's Health and had documentation from, months ago from their previous visit that illustrate my child is unable to wear a mask due to their disability or any other factors. That would also be another reason. If a student is on an IEP or they currently have a 504, then it would convene a team to determine, along with the parent, just as we do on any IEP or a 504 team decision, to determine if there's an educational barrier by wearing a mask, that student would not have to wear a mask. And then thirdly, if a teacher observes regularly in their classroom or through the screening process, this student is not unable or it creates a significant barrier to their learning, or they may be more affected because they can't stop touching their face regularly, and the teacher and the parent and the administrator agree, yeah, that this isn't going to work for this student, there would be the ability for that child not to wear that mask. So those are already currently in place on current state health orders.
So, not to oversimplify it, but if a parent doesn't want their kids to wear a mask just because, they could still file an exemption on their own, and it would be reviewed by county health and up the line.
Under current state health orders, I am not aware of a process to be able to do that. Would that be correct, Heather?
Right. And, you know, this is just kind of throwing it out there. I don't know, there's an idea, but if we did an exemption or a county-wide variance, in that variance to go outside the state health orders, we could put an example to allow each school, like whether that's the school nurse or a delegated person, if they know that person, they can make that choice to talk to the parent themselves. Instead of doing each individual one, it would be up to a delegated person or a school nurse at each school facility to make that decision whether that kid is able to wear a mask or not wear a mask. Does that make sense?
I think I got it. Any other questions? Maybe you have clarifying questions in regards to that statement?
I mean, those are still in those special circumstances that we're talking about. I mean,
We would still have to apply for a variance to have that in effect, yes.
Will we possibly have some shields? I mean, like you said, the masks are better than face shields, but for those students that may not be able to wear a mask,
We have
can we
also,
try that option of shields?
we've also included actually face shields in a couple of our orders for other situations, whether they be for instructors, because we do know in working with children that are unable to wear masks, there's certain situations in close proximity. In addition to the staff member wearing a mask, they also may need to wear a face shield just because of certain situations. So we already do have a significant order placed for face shields. Just to make sure and have you maybe repeat that motion if we're to that point again, just so everybody knows exactly, because I did not restate it in a way that everybody currently understood. And I'd like it to come from you since you made that motion, if that would be all right.
Right. I guess I believe that the intent was that we would apply for variance from the county to allow parents to sign a permission slip, if you will, for their student to be exempt from wearing a mask when they cannot.
Is everyone clear on the motion?
Seem like what we're asking Rob.
May I also ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Would that just include students? I just didn't know if that would also include staff or for the enforcement in regards to mask wearing for adult individuals working in the school district.
I guess I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I think we're parents making choices for our children. We're not making our choices for teachers.
I just wanted to clarify because I know I will be asked that question if it would include staff that would still, so it'd be the expectation that we still follow state health orders in regards to any staff on K through 12 in K through 12 buildings or even visitors in that manner. Okay, thank you.
All right, we will proceed with the vote. As requested, this will be a roll call vote. And as I did previously, I'll vote first, and I vote in opposition to this motion.
And because now I think I have a full understanding, instead of an individual case, it would be for district-wide. I don't want to make the decision whether people ask their children to not wear masks or to ask masks. So for that reason, I vote for the motion.
Well, I'm in favor of giving people the choice. And essentially what I think is that we're letting our health people help us make that decision. So I vote for.
I vote opposed because I personally feel that it's covered adequately in the current plan. The variance can happen so long as the parent, the teacher, the administrator, and possibly the school nurse are involved.
I vote against the motion for the reasons stated by Trustee Clayton.
I will vote against.
I'm sorry?
I vote against.
Thank you.
I vote for the motion.
Trustee McClung
I'll vote for the motion.
and Trustee Boynton.
I vote against the motion.
That motion has failed by a vote of 5-4. Are there any other matters you would like to discuss regarding the exemptions or variances? Now we will proceed to item E. We're considering the approval of our purchase exceeding $5,000 for the portable plexiglass desk dividers. Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
And any discussion?
Madam Chairman,
Sir.
I realize that this is going to come from the CARES money. And I realize that this is a better option than face masks. And it might get us down the road some way. But I also want people to understand that kids are kids. And they're going to take these things and beat on each other with them. I mean, the germs that are on those things are going to be everywhere. And I don't know that once a day cleaning is going to cut.
And it may require us to visit that and actually specifically discuss it.
So,
Absolutely.
anyway, that's why I would be voting against the motion to buy these, even though I think they're a better alternative than masks.
And Superintendent Kramer, what is ESSER?
That is in essence, as Trustee
CARES.
Wagner referred to, the CARES dollars.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
sir.
I also agree with Mr. Wagner as far as, or Trustee Wagner regarding the sanitizing of the plexiglass. In your Smart Start, you talked about in here somewhere, I think it's under the facilities where there's a cleaning kit that every classroom is going to have where it be used to. So some way, I think that there might be a little bit more in detail that could be actually looked at to have those cleaned a little bit more frequently than once a day. However, I have to say, going back to, the education of our children, they learn better with their life. And, I think that that's kind of where we're all at, making sure that we have students in there be able to educate them.
Any further discussion on this item?
I'd like to just ask the question. I know the delivery dates we're talking after August 31st. So what do we do in the meantime?
We start with the lower grades first, fill up what we possibly can, and then go from there possibly as much as possible. Provide as much opportunities for the 6-foot distancing and social distancing to provide those breaks. That may in turn require us in some classes to take more frequent breaks. utilize outdoor classrooms more often also, because I absolutely 100% agree with the need for all of our students to have breaks from masks. And if we can't do that in the plexiglass ability, we do that and we find other ways to do that in a safe way by following that 6-foot distance or finding ways we can accommodate that.
Teachers are creative. They'll find ways to make it work.
Any further discussion?
I think it's checking a box, allowing us to get our kids in a classroom without a mask. Kids are gonna play together after school, they're gonna see each other at whatever sport, and it's gonna be probably a lot like graduations. We went to all the efforts to social distance on the football field, and afterwards the families gathered for pictures in the parking lots, just as usual. And it's how institutions are working these days. It's checking a box, and it's allowing Goshen County kids to get back without the mask as much as we can. So although I don't know if it's, long-term, when we look back and say that was a silly use of funding, maybe, but I feel like we should do it because it's our best way to move forward right now.
Trustee Patrick, I just want to make sure and clarify so everyone understands too what this allows us to go back with everyone at school as opposed to a tier 2 or a tier 3. It does allow all of our students every day to come to school, because if we were in a tier 2A or 2B or 2C, that doesn't allow for that. And so just making sure that everybody understands currently, the plan is that we are currently identified in tier 1B with all students on campus at the same time for right now, based on where we're currently sitting at. The other piece that entails is an ability to provide all specials regularly, recesses. That's been a major question also. It allows all those things to still occur. Of course, they will look different because in some circumstances, if masks aren't able to be worn, for instance, in band, there will have to be a situation in which they're separated by that 6 feet. Band in venues like this, as opposed to our current venues. But current state health orders do allow us in a facility that can accommodate to exceed 50 individuals in a room. Otherwise, before it was not that. And so we should have, this allows us to at least return to some semblance of normalcy, but looks dramatically different. But it is, like Trustee Miller referenced, it is a box to check to get us back into the doors.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask the trustees who wish to approve of this purchase, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
And abstentions? And that matter was approved 8-1. There being no further business to come before the board, I will adjourn in a moment. I'd like to ask those of us who have joined us this evening, if you would leave the room, starting in the back of the room, and space yourself so that you're kind of 6 feet apart from the other family groups until you get outside. We'd appreciate it. So,
Madam Chairman, we're not going to allow the audience to participate in this activity.
what activity?
We're not going to allow the audience to participate in this meeting.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
Reference to this being a special meeting,
Are we
not
not
public
going to
comment.
allow the audience to voice their opinions in this meeting?
There's no public forum on the agenda, and there was no amendment to insert a public forum. So our agenda is concluded. And our meeting is adjourned.